Hello, everyone. My name is Shaz, and tonight we're going to be looking at tips for challenging behaviors in the Chinese classroom. I'm so glad that you could be here. I started Mandarin Teachers Institute at the beginning of this year, 2025, just so that we can get together, we can share ideas, and we can really support each other in the Chinese classroom. So we have two approaches. One is the consequences and compliance approach, and the other one is connection and correction. So if you're not familiar with either of these, let's get started. So we're going to first of all look at the consequences. So this is something that you may be familiar with, where you have expectations for the students, and then you model the expectations. The students understand what the expectations are in the classroom. And then if students choose to not follow those expectations, then there are consequences. This is very fast to enforce, right? It's useful when there's a major disruption. You can have consequences for their behavior. It also risks power struggles with students. This option really works best when it's paired with relationship building. So you understand the students, they understand you. So why? Why use consequences? Well, as I said before, there are clear, consistent rules and there's consequences. There are expectations and the consequences that naturally follow. So students understand that the sequence is, you have expectations. If you choose not to follow those, then there will be consequences. And it's very fast to enforce, right? It's useful in large classrooms or when there's safety issues or emergencies, but it may shut down repeated disruption, right? May shut down repeated disruption, but risks damaging relationships if overused. So it's really good for maybe once or twice, but if you continue using this, then there's really not going to be any change within your classroom management procedures. The other one we're going to look at tonight is connection and correction. So this is stronger with students who feel maybe misunderstood, they're anxious, they're disconnected. It's slower to act, right? So with consequences, you can say, you have a verbal warning, the consequence is whatever you've decided it's going to be. With connection and correction, it's slower, right? But it builds long-term buy-in with the students. It doesn't always require an immediate response when there's a challenging behavior. And some of you might be thinking, well, how does that work? We'll get into that in just a minute. It requires emotional intelligence, it requires time, and it requires patience. So if you are a teacher who really cares about your students and you're willing to put in the time and to be patient, this is a really good option for you. It's really good for language classrooms because it lowers the affective filter, right, which is crucial for success. So you want students to be relaxed. You don't want them to be angry and frustrated and revengeful. You don't want any of that in your language classroom. So the connection and correction option may be useful for you to consider. Why? Why does this work? Well, first of all, it focuses on why the behavior is happening. So for the first option we looked at, which was the consequences, it really doesn't look at any why. It just says, these are expectations, these are the consequences, and that's it, right? Whereas the connection and correction is thinking about why. And the main underlying, I guess, theme is that behavior is communication. So when students misbehave or there's behavior issues, then it's communicating something. It also leaves dignity intact. There's no shaming. There's no, I've had enough of this, you have to go to the office, or there's none of that, especially in front of the class. And it also builds long-term trust with the teacher and the students. So this is long-term, this is not immediate, whereas the consequences one is pretty easy to implement. You have the expectations, you have the consequences, and you have backup. You can send students to the office, you can write them up. So they're two very different approaches, but we'll look at them in a little bit more depth now. So as I said before, the consequences-based management is pretty straightforward. You would all be familiar with it, where you have expectations for your students. You tell them, for the little ones, looking eyes, listening ears, quiet voices, helping hands. So you have very simple expectations for your students' behavior. And for the older kids, maybe you might say, respect the teacher. Well, they need to know what that looks like rather than just say respect. What sort of behaviors do you want to see if you want to be respected? Raise your hand to speak. That is pretty easy to see what they need to do. So these are just expectations that generally all teachers have, or rules, if you like to call them that. Then the teacher will model those, right? So it's not just enough to say, these are my expectations. You need to actually show what this looks like, what this behavior looks like. So when you say, come into the classroom quietly, does that mean we can whisper? Does it mean that we have to be completely zero voice? So the teacher will model what that looks like. This is what it looks like when we enter our classroom. Right? So you will model it, or the students will model it. And so all students completely understand what's expected in the classroom. This is what it looks like to raise your hand to speak. You model it again. So this is what I need to see. This is what I need to hear. So you make it very explicit so that there's no misunderstanding of what your expectations are. Then you practice it. So you don't just leave this the first week. Every week you practice those behaviors, expectations, and consequences. Let's practice. Can someone show me how to get my attention? Right? Raise your hand. And this is especially good if you have students who continually call out. You can stop and say, let's practice. Can someone show me how to get my attention? So you're using it all the time and you're modeling what behavior you want to see. Let's practice. Show me, what do you do when you hear the quiet signal, right? You might have a bell, or you might have a tambourine or something, and then students will stop what they're doing and show you what it looks like to respond to the quiet signal. So it's pretty easy, and you practice it every day. You be consistent. So if students continually don't follow their expectations, then you need to follow through with that. So you cannot just say, well, next time you better do it right the next time, and then you just forget about it. That's not being consistent. So you have to be consistent with your follow through and speak to the students after. You can also, if you're doing expectations, correct and reward the behavior you want to see. So catch students doing the right thing, right? I like the way Luke is listening. Mark, thank you for coming into the classroom so quietly. Or fantastic, you have your book opened ready. So you catch students doing the right thing. And these types of behaviors will slowly go away because you're rewarding the good behaviors and not the bad behaviors. And you can do things like have tickets, give out tickets to students. You can have stickers, thumbs up. You can do a whole lot of things to reward students for their good behavior. Now, with consequences, there's a number of steps you can take, and it's really up to you and to your school as to how you respond to challenging behaviors. You can redirect, right? That's just the first step. Students come in, they're unsettled, they're not sitting down at their seats. So you can redirect. You need to get started on the do now activity, thanks, and walk away. So giving the direction again, the instructions again, and thanks, assuming that they're going to comply and walk away, is very, very effective. You can restate the expectation. In our classroom, I expect you to, and then tell them, maybe sit down and begin your work, and you might give them a VB, a verbal warning. So that might be one of the consequences. Another one could be a conversation with student outside of the class. In this class, this is what I saw. What will you do next time? And this can be written up in a reflection sheet, and you can talk it over with the student, and then it's signed by the parents, so there's documentation. You might also do a separation, a cool down period, where they might have to sit aside from the class, or you might have a buddy teacher where you can send students who are particularly angry or particularly emotional. And then also you can do parent caregiver contact, call, email. You can do temporary separation or a cool down. So maybe you have a buddy teacher where you can send the students when they get very emotional or angry, just for a cool down period. Number 6, you can call the parents and the caregivers. You can send them an email. It's really good to keep parents up to date as to what behavior is happening in the classroom, particularly if it's ongoing. And then lastly, the office referral, and that's where the admin might get involved. So this is just an example. It really is up to what steps your school has. But this is just an example to show you this approach. It starts with expectations and then goes into consequences. So you stay neutral, you don't get emotional, you try not to get into a power struggle with students, and you just stick to the facts, right? This is what I saw. I asked you to sit down. You did not want to sit down. And then we had to talk that over. So you just stick to the facts. Don't take it personally. It's really important to stick with what you saw, the facts only, and don't take it personally. So redirect for low disruptions, like students who are talking, moving, off task, making noises, distracting others. These are pretty low level disruptions. So you want to, right from day one, make sure that students know what's expected of them. You can do proximity. So you can walk next to a student and you don't even have to say anything, right? So if they're talking when you're trying to teach, you can just go and stand next to their desk, and sometimes that will really get them back on task. You can put a reminder on their desk or their table, like a little yellow card, which might be VB. It could be a verbal warning. You don't even have to say anything. So students may know that if you get a yellow card, that's the first step before you get the consequence. And thanks, saying thanks after anything is a really effective strategy. Very, very effective. Go up to the students. Okay, you need to open your book and get started. Thanks. Walk away, right? Don't give them any time to question or to start an argument. Thanks, that's it. And then continue teaching. So the whole aim of having a management plan is that teaching's effective. So you want to get back to teaching as soon as you can. You don't want to get into a power struggle with students who are arguing with you, because that's actually getting you away from teaching. So your main priority is to make sure that students continue learning. Never have a power struggle with a student, and this is very easy to get into. So, typical teacher might say, Peter, why are you calling out? I wasn't calling out. I saw you call out. Stop it. But it wasn't me. So this is getting into a power struggle now. So never engage with a student who has an audience, if possible. And you can do a redirect or a warning. You can have a private conversation with that student before they leave the class, or you can also plan to see them after school, send a note home to the parents that you just need to have a bit of a chat. So there's lots of different ways you can do that, but it's very important that you don't get into a power struggle. I've seen so many teachers get into a power struggle, and not only does it doesn't work, but it also ruins the relationship between the whole class as well as just that person, that student who is choosing not to follow the expectations. You can also do a whole class reminder. So you might see one student, maybe, who doesn't come into the room correctly, right? So let's remember our class agreement. What do we do when we come into the room? Show me, right? Show me what it looks like when you come into the classroom. I want to remind everyone, quiet voices inside. Thanks. Students also need to know what quiet voices mean. Does quiet voices mean 0 voice? Or does it maybe mean 1 or 2 level voice? So it needs to be very explicit what you expect. Who can show me how you raise your hand to speak? Thanks. So you can do this as a whole class without actually just pointing out 1 or 2 students. And again, this is just going over again, remind, thanks, walk away. Remember, you need to start the do now activity on the board, thanks. I expect you to use your quiet voice, thanks, and keep moving, right? Okay, and one-to-one chats are always better than public chats. So as I said before, particularly in high school or middle school, where you have an audience of a whole class, it's very important not to get into a power struggle because it really disrupts the learning. And then the other students are also affected by that as well. So if possible, plan a one-to-one chat. That can either be just outside in the hallway, if you have a really good class and they can continue working. You don't want to leave the classroom, but you could just be in the back of the classroom, or it could be at lunchtime or at recess time, sometime where you can just chat with them and say, hey, I just need 5 minutes. Can we just talk about what happened in the class? Right, so here, we need to have a conversation, so please stay back at the end of class if your school allows you to do that. This is an example of some strategies that you can use. One, proximity. Walk over, just stand at a desk, continue teaching, don't stop teaching, and she might just get the message. Redirect, right? Tell her again, okay, you're not on task, let's get on to our work, open your book. A reminder when we come into the classroom, this is what I expect you to do to get started, okay? Number 4, a private or one-to-one conversation with her, and then repair and plan. So it's very important before the student, particularly if it's a major behavior challenge, it's really important that there's a conversation with that student somehow, and that you repair the relationship and you plan ahead. So students need to know that maybe you didn't address it there and then, but you will address it. You will talk to the student. You will come up with a plan that's going to be in effect for the next class. And for the lower grades, of course, you can do redirect, remind the students of the expectation, have a calming center. It could just be a little chair where students sit and maybe they have something to hold on to, some sensory toy, and then a parent call to discuss the child's behavior. So that is consequences and expectations and consequences approach. We're going to now look at something very different called the connection and correction. This is very much based on knowing your students. So if you're in high school, you're going to have to put the time in to get to know your students, not just what they do in the Chinese class, but what sport do they play? What things do they like? Who are their friends? So you're going to have to build up respect, not a friend. You're not looking for a friend. You are the mentor, right? You are the teacher. They are students. But in order to use this approach, the connection and correction, you need to have a connection with your students. Okay, so you have a behavior, a challenging behavior. The first thing you do with this approach is you observe first. So you look at it, look at the behavior, and you're calm. So you do not react, you do not say, don't disrespect me, you remain calm. So you really need to think, what am I really seeing? What might be the cause? So you know the students, right? You know the students, maybe you know their home life, you know who their friends are, you know when they feel unsettled. So you're getting to know them as actual human beings, as people. And you're going to watch without labeling. And then curiosity beats judgment. So you're just curious about this kind of behavior. For example, a student with a bad attitude may feel overwhelmed or disconnected. So you're going to observe first and be calm. So this is very different to the previous approach we looked at. You're going to connect one-to-one with that student before you correct the behavior. So you're always going to correct the behavior, just like when you have expectations and consequences, you correct the behavior. In this approach, you also always correct the behavior. So you're not going to let any behavior slide. So as I said before, the underlying theme of this approach, connection before correction, is behavior is often a message. So can I respond with empathy first? So you're going to use private low stakes check-ins, right? You're going to go up and say, hey, you seem to be off today. Do you want to talk? Do you just need some space? Can I get you started on this, right? So you know the students, you've got to know them. you know what food they like, you know what sports they like, you know how far away from the school they have to come. So you know all about the students. So this requires a lot of work at the beginning of the year or any time really of getting to know the students. And it's not just giving them forms to complete. It's actually sitting down with them, having a conversation. What are your goals? What do you do? What do you want to do when you complete high school? Do you want to go to college? What kind of job would you like? So you're trying to get an idea of who the students are. So this relies heavily on your time at the beginning of the year, getting to know the students. And this is just part of the first week, the second week, rather than doing icebreakers or giving a form out to students. You can do that as well, but it really requires really intensive time to get to know your students. So you're going to be direct. You're going to set clear and consistent boundaries. So you're just going to state the facts. You can be warm, but still hold the line, right? So you don't want to shame the students. You calmly name the behavior and the boundary. So what I saw was, right? This is what I saw when you came into the classroom. You were running around the room. You didn't sit down straight away. Or we don't speak to each other like that here. Maybe they were saying something, some sort of language, right? So you remind them about the boundary. We don't speak that language here. Maybe they were bullying someone, which is not okay. So class starts when the bell rings. Let's try again tomorrow, right? So you've addressed it and you've given them a chance to try again tomorrow. There's no shaming, there's no sarcasm, there's just clarity. This is what I saw, this is what I expect next time. And you offer a way back in. You know, what small step can help them re-engage or repair? Give them a chance to reset. You don't know what happened in the class before your class, right? You don't know what the teacher said to the students. So sometimes you have students coming into your class who are really angry or really unsettled. So you really don't know what situation they've come from. So you allow them some time to reset. Involve the student in solving the issue. So instead of saying, this is the expectation, this is the consequence, I need to write you up for this behavior. Instead of saying that, you can say, what would help you get through the rest of the class? So right now, you seem unsettled, and you can just do this privately with the student, just quietly. You don't have to speak over the whole class. So you may get the student starting working. You might just pull the student aside in the classroom and just say, hey, you know, what would help you get through the rest of the class? I noticed you came in unsettled. And let them save face, you know, while still growing. So you want students to grow in their emotional reactivity. Are we back on track now? Good. Okay, let's go. Always follow up with this approach. Reflect and repair. And this is usually one-on-one. It can be in a form that they complete, or it could be just before a class or after a class or at lunchtime, after school. So how can we learn from this together? Always follow up one-on-one later, not in front of peers. So you want this conversation between, you can have another teacher there, but it needs to be between you and the student. Questions like, what happened earlier? What do you think we can do differently next time? How can I support you to succeed? Are we all good, right? So you're trying to mentor this student in the Chinese class to actually be a team member, right? To be successful in their learning of Chinese. So why this works? Connection before correction, number one, you're looking for the why behind the behavior. Number two, one-to-one conversation. It says dignity lowers defensiveness and no power struggles, because you're not going to talk about one student's behavior in front of the whole class. Number three, choice instead of command gives the student a sense of agency. And number four, follow-up. Show you care about them as a person, not just their behavior. Okay, so let's look at some examples using this connection before correction. Student refuses to follow directions. Okay, so number one, stay calm, don't power struggle. Take a breath, keep your voice low and neutral. Don't escalate in front of the class, right? So students just not following, won't follow your directions, won't open the book, won't sit down. I guess they'll sit down, but they won't do any work, right? Go up to them privately, get the other kids working, walk over or signal for a quick hallway chat or at the back of the room chat, right? In a soft tone. So you're not going to go up and make everyone hear what you're saying, if possible. Hey, I notice you don't want to switch seats. Is something up, right? So you have asked the student to switch seats instead of saying, no, you will switch seats or you will be on detention, right? So this is trying to use some empathy with students, and this will work for some students and it won't work for other students. So the key is knowing your students, knowing which ones will respond to this approach. And then number 3, listen for the why. Sometimes it's about feeling safe, sitting near friends, anxiety. Acknowledge that. I get it. It's hard to move when you want to be with your friends. Offer a choice of compromise. I need you in a different spot for this activity. So the teacher doesn't back down on their request. You need to move seats. Would you rather move now or after we start? Right? So you can give them a choice. Would you rather move now or would you rather move after we start the class? You move for this class and then we'll chat about what works for both of us after class. So you can see here, we're trying to work as a team here. It's not a power struggle where I say you must do this, but the teacher doesn't let go of what the expectation is, and that is to follow directions. It's just done in a different way. Remind student of the classroom agreement, right? So you build up trust, and knowledge about the students. And then you say, in this class, we agree to follow directions so everyone can learn. Why? Because your success is the most important thing to me. So students know what the expectation is in the classroom agreement and why they should follow the directions. Give a short reset and check back. Okay, take 30 seconds. I'll come back and see which seat you picked, right? So the teacher gives them a choice. You move now or you move when we start doing the activity. Walk away. Give the student space to comply without feeling forced. And then number 7, follow up one-to-one later. So whatever the student decided, you go in one way or another direction, but follow up one-to-one later, right? As they're going out, finishing off class, you say, can I just have a minute? I saw you didn't want to move. Can we talk about how to handle that next time? Work out a plan for future transitions, assign seating or signals. So this is just one example of how that approach can be used in the classroom. And you can have scripts, right? You can practice what you want to say. Students refuse to follow directions. If you see it as a battle, it has to be won right there and then. With this approach, you're connecting with the student, connecting and then correcting. So the focus becomes control, compliance, and power when you have expectations and consequences. You might win the moment, but lose the relationship and the learning that could follow. So when you're using expectations and consequences, it's very short term, right? So, and you might have to do it a number of times over and over again. With this approach, connection and then correction, it's more long term and it's not the quick win. You're still going to get the student to comply and do what you've asked them to do, but you're going to connect with that student and find out, what's going on, what's happening. I know you want to be with your friends. We all want to be with our friends. What can we do next time? So it's more about communicating with that student. So I'm just putting this out here so that you can see the different ways that you can manage challenging behaviors. And all students are different. So different students will respond to different approaches. If you see it as a connection and correction, the goal is growth. The goal is for these kids to grow emotionally, not punishment. They feel seen, heard, and guided. They understand the behavior is separate from who they are. Okay, so it's long-term gain. So why does it work? Connection first, right? It starts with curiosity and empathy, not confrontation. If a student says, no, I'm not going to sit, I'm not going to change seats, usually it's like a confrontation. The teacher gets angry, the teacher says, you're disrespecting me, and it just snowballs from there. With this approach, it starts off with curiosity and empathy, right? And the student says, no, I want to sit with my friends. You say, oh, that's interesting. Let's chat about this after class, okay? So all the students know that this is not gonna go well because they're going to actually talk about it, and eventually the teacher is going to ask students to do what he or she has asked. It preserves respect. It's usually done privately or one-to-one, either in the back of the classroom. It can be done, with another teacher. It can be done out in the playground with all the people around. And responsibility is built in. So student has to co-create a plan for next time. Usually if there's consequences, the student will come back and there's no plan. So there's no follow-up. So this really requires students to start thinking about their behavior and how it can be changed. And then the identity is reinforced. The teacher reminds the student they're capable and respected. So it's based on connecting with students by building positive relationships with each student. And this requires time. It could just be a quick check-in, like, hey, I like your shoes, or hey, what's that on the back of your school bag? Just showing interest in students will allow you to connect with them. Okay, this is another behavior. Students call out, right? So the behavior is students interrupt or they talk out of turn constantly. You can do step 1, 3, 2, 1, reset, or you can have a color card or a verbal warning. Step 2, you can practice routines. Let's try again together. When I say a question, we wait, and then snap your fingers when you're ready. So you can actually start reinforcing what you want to happen. And there's lots of other things there, but you can look through that later. Okay, side conversations. This is very frustrating when you're trying to teach and you have two students who are chatting side by side together. So they're whispering or they're talking during instruction. Using proximity, you can just go over and stand over there and continue teaching, walk over silently, don't say anything. You can use a nonverbal cue, like tap the desk or make eye contact with the students or give the teacher stare with raised eyebrows. You can signal and release. Let's reset 30 seconds of silence to refocus. So this doesn't rise to, this is not a major disturbance, but this is low level that really needs to be stopped in the classroom. So you're going to maybe reset the class, say, okay, 30 seconds of silence, let's just reset again. Okay, and step 4, make it teachable. Discuss why silence can help everyone stay in the flow when needed. Okay. Negative attitude. You may have had a student who said, this is dumb. Why do we have to learn Chinese anyway? I've had many students say that to me. So what you're going to do, so, you might, as a teacher, might say, no, it's not dumb, right? You can have a good job when you learn Chinese. And so you can get really involved and engaged with the student. But the thing is, it usually ends up as a battle. So this approach, you're going to decenter the drama. Right, that's an interesting thought, right? So you can use curiosity. That's an interesting thought. Let's come back to that, right? So you're teaching and the student says, oh, this is dumb. Why do we even have to learn Chinese? That's an interesting thought. Hold that. Let's come back to that. And then as they're going out of the class, I just need you for a few minutes after class. So then you can talk to them. This is what I saw. I saw you say, this is dumb. Why do we have to learn? This is the effect your words had on the class. So you need to show the student that what they're saying is affecting the whole class, right? And inappropriate language. So you might have swearing, mocking others, inappropriate jokes. So you stop the harm quickly. So this is a very high level, for me, very high level challenging behavior. You stop the harm quickly. Say, that doesn't fly in this room. There's zero tolerance for name calling in our classroom. Our room is a no bullying zone, right? So you restate the expectation of language. No swearing, mocking others, inappropriate jokes, right from the first one. And there's no public shaming. I need a few minutes after class to chat with you. Lunchtime, after school, back of the classroom. And then step 3, you have a one-to-one conversation. This is why I say this approach is very time consuming, because there's a lot of follow-up, students don't come back into your classroom until you've followed up with them and you have a plan for them to come back into your classroom. Now, sometimes you can't do this by yourself. Sometimes you may need to have another teacher do this, or you may have admin who may want to step in and do this as well. So the conversation is focused on the impact and empathy. So I know that might have been a joke to you, but here's how it felt to others. So you're trying to teach kids about empathy. When you say words like that, try and think about how that other person feels. Let's make a plan to ensure this doesn't happen again. You're being very direct. You're explaining that this is not going to fly in this room. Our room is a no bullying zone. You ask for a one-to-one in lunchtime, after school, whenever you can. And then you talk about the impact that that language had, and we're going to make a plan for next time. Making random noises when the teacher is talking. This has happened to me a number of times. It starts off very quite funny, but then it becomes very annoying. So random noises could be anything. Could be clicking, whistling, humming, animal sounds, tapping, all of these things that distract from learning. So number 1, you're going to observe calmly and locate the source. So you need to know who is doing that. So you don't want to accuse one student who's not doing it. And you're going to have a brief pause with eye contact and a calm look, right? So you're going to be calm. You're then going to connect privately or non-verbally. You're going to use proximity, go and stand in that area and continue teaching. The whole goal of any behavior management plan is to continue teaching, to not disrupt learning. So you're going to go over into that area and continue teaching quietly. You okay? Anything you need to tell me? Right? And then you're going to go back to the front of the classroom wherever you were. You're going to set the boundary firmly. We don't interrupt the learning environment like that. Are we clear? Are we good? Yep. Okay. And then maybe you reset them with a quick responsibility, like, oh, help me pass out these and then get back in. So you might give them a job to do, right? I have these papers, pass these out, thanks. Or shift their attention. Let's see if you can lead the next transition. And then reflect later. Was that boredom? Were you trying to make someone laugh? You're creative. Let's find a better way to use that rather than making noises or tapping or humming or whistling or whatever it was. So you try and work out a plan for next time. Okay, students' use of a phone. So I know schools have their policies and you may have your own policy, but you're going to pre-teach the norm. So this is just an example. Phones must be put away during instruction in a bag on silent. You're going to practice it. Students are going to show you how to put it on silent, how to put it in their bag, and then frame it as helping everyone win and be successful. So you as a student, you're part of the team in the classroom. So everyone needs to know what the expectation is for putting their phones away. Right, so if a phone is out, stay cool. So this connection and then correction approach. First thing, stay cool, stay calm. Use proximity, right? And a silent gesture. So you might just put your hand out like that, okay? Or whisper, hey, phone away so you can stay with us. Then if they ignore that, you have a private reset, a quiet conversation, not to the whole class. You're cool. Bag it or park it on my desk until the end of class or the end of day, right? So you give him a choice or give him or her a choice. You're cool, your choice. Bag it or park it on my desk until the end of class. So they have a choice there. And they still won't comply, right? You're going to have quick, calm action. Move the seat, hold the phone, or follow school policy. No drama. just the facts, right? So the student didn't want to put their phone away. You're going to have the phone, hold the phone. Once they choose what they want to do, either bag it away or put it on my desk. And then you may also need to contact admin if they still won't comply with that. Then after class, you're going to restore and repair. So check in. Let's make a plan for next time you want to use your phone in class. What are we going to do when you feel the urge just to look at your phone? And so you can write it down. Student can write down what their plan is next time that happens in the class. So a comparison of two different styles. So this is put your phone away. First one is connection and correction. Hey, want to talk or just need a minute? You can put it away now or hold on to it and give it back. I'll hold on to it and give it back after class. Check in after class. What's going on lately? You're usually more tuned in, right? So this teacher knows the student, knows what to say to the student. The consequences-based approach. Put your phone away or I'll take it. Immediately, the student becomes angry and defiant. Then you're going to enforce the consequence. They're not going to take it. The phone is taken immediately and reported, right? So that's not going, the student's not going to be happy about that. And there's no follow-up. Student is logged in behavior tracking system. So you can see even the final consequence is totally different. And the goal is very different as well in the two different approaches. So this is side by side the type of beliefs that the connection correction approach has, and then the traditional. So the first core belief, behavior is communication. With the traditional consequences, behavior must be corrected, and it's usually short-term correction. The focus, connection before correction, traditional consequences, compliance before connection. And then the teacher's role is very different as well. The behavior goal is long-term self-regulation with connection and correction. And with consequences, it's short-term compliance. Just do it now. They come back into your classroom, they may do it again, right? There's no plan going forward. There's been no follow-up. So I'm not going to go through everything here, but you can see it's very, very different. And you, as a teacher, may have to choose one or the other or a bit of both, depending on what your students are like and whether you know your students. So all students are different and students will react differently to different approaches, and all teachers are different as well. So I think there needs to be a balance. You can choose control and consequences. I have to win this now to get the class back on track. And that's the most common behavior management approach I see. I have to win it now to get the class back on track. You need compliance. It's based on obedience and control, and it's temporary, minimal disruptions. If you choose connection and correction, I'm here to help you grow and self-regulate. And the focus is going to be on empathy and connection, and also curiosity and calmness. The outcome may be lasting behavior change because you've built that connection with that student. That's the two approaches that I've gone through tonight. So you need to find an approach that really works for you and for your students. So I'd be very interested if anyone has used this approach, because it seems like it would be really useful in the Chinese language classroom where you want students to be positive, and you want students to have a good relationship with the teacher. That's all I have tonight. If you have any questions, please email me. My email, you can go to my website, mandarinteachersinstitute.com, and you can ask questions about any particular challenging behaviors that you have in your classroom. You can ask me questions. You can tell me about your management style. Do you use expectations and consequences, which is the most common way? Or are you interested in the connection and correction approach? So I'd love to hear from you. And I hope to see you at some more upcoming webinars. We have differentiation in the classroom coming up, as well as storytelling with picture talks. And we have a special webinar that uses Bluey and Peppa Pig to learn Chinese vocab. So that's all for me tonight. I'm really glad that you were here, and I hope to see you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.